Hey, book clubs are booming. Besides the traditional ones in people's living rooms, they're happening in libraries, in pubs. I've even heard of silent book clubs. Now, silence is just not how we roll here at The Next Chapter, but we are going to start our own book club. It's a new feature going forward where we bring friends, colleagues, columnists, and we dive into one particular book. Today, that book is James by Percival Everett. It's one of 2024's biggest books, and James reimagines Mark Twain's classic, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. You know, the one where a young kid, Huck, runs away from home and floats down the Mississippi, and accompanying him is a slave named Jim. Jim, with Percival Everett's touch, becomes James, and the book is told from his point of view. Today, joining me for our discussion is Christina Estima here in the Toronto studio, and in Vancouver, JJ Lee. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
There's lots to talk about with this book. I'm going to jump right into it. So, Christine, this book is a retelling, a reimagining. I don't know which one you'd call it, but it is in conversation with Huck Finn. So what do you think is the one thing that people need to know about Huck Finn before they read James?
Ooh. Well, Huck Finn, it's obviously a classic story. I think a lot of us read it in school, but for those of us who didn't, it's a story that takes place in the 19th century during American slavery. And what we find is there's a young white boy who escapes from his home, and he is on a raft going downriver with an escaped slave named Jim.
I want to bring you in on this, JJ, because you had an interesting experience the first time you tried to read Huck Finn. So can you tell us that story about when you first tried to read Huck Finn?
Well, I mean, I think of it as the book that everyone doesn't know what to do with because of the N-word that's used with great profusion in it. And I think that's
that elephant. It's there it is.
And I think that's the hardest part of the experience is the diction and the deployment of dialect. And I suppose one can argue that it's a nod to code switching, or it could be a nod to something a bit more sinister in terms of, inducing in the mind of the reader and all sorts of stereotypes. So for me, I'm having this encounter with this book where I'm not contending only with the referent, which is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but I'm actually reading it and thinking about how do I consume Black culture? How do I look at, like, say, rap or hip hop or any content like on the Zeus Network?
Yeah, and we're gonna get there, but I just want to establish the difficulty with this in the first place, because Huckleberry Finn is one of the most banned books in America because of the N-word and the portrayal of slavery. And I think there's something that's going on in this book about Percival's point, which is, look, do we talk about this stuff, or that's unpleasant, or do we just hide it? Do we just put it away?
I mean, it makes me wonder, though, like, Huckleberry, I don't know if Huckleberry Finn actually talks about it the way we need it to be talked about, and I think that's why James, the book, exists. There's this kind of, like, cultural urgency to address issues now about how white people look at Black people and read Black people. That's what I find exciting about James.
Well, for me, it was a stunning book because it's based on a book from 1885, I think, and every page I read, I was stunned by how much it was my life now.
Really?
Because let's be real. Black people always have a dial that we set about how Black are we going to be in this current company. Like, that's the first thing. You have to read
the room.
It's the first thing we do. We look at the room and we set the dial, and it's like, cop just pulled you over. It's like 1.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, Chris, about this code switching element, because it's really central to what is being talked about. So there's a really funny scene that's early in the book. There's James, and he's talking to a group of kids, kids, including his own daughter, and he's teaching these black kids, hey, here's how you talk to white folks. And can you take that and just tell us a little bit about that code switch and that particular scene?
That scene is really brilliant because when he's talking to other black people, he is eloquent, he is erudite, but he says to the kids, he's like, when you are around the whites, when you are around the slave owners, you cannot in any way show your intelligence, your ingenuity. And there's a specific instance he uses. He's like, if you see a fire, you cannot say to the whites, hey, there's a fire. You have to be like, there's something happening over there. And then let the whites realize, oh, it's a fire. Because if you in any way show that you are clever, that can put your life as a slave in jeopardy.
You're in danger. And literally he says, and I remember this line clearly, he says, paraphrasing, the smarter they think they are than you, the safer you are.
Absolutely. and it's a way to stay safe in a world that, black lives are brutalized and black bodies are brutalized and for the smallest infractions that aren't even infractions.
So is that... I just want to jump in because this entire conversation makes me think of a very particular chapter where James is kind of cut loose for a brief moment and is discovered to be a fine tenor. And he is essentially
don't jump the gun. I want to talk about this one. I love this scene so much. Let's talk about that scene. Let's jump in. So the scene is, for those that don't know, a minstrel show was a really popular form of entertainment at that time where white folks would dress up in what we'd call blackface, and they would basically sing songs that they think black people would sing, which is ridiculous, but it was popular. And
it was a caricature of black people.
It was a caricature.
They would take burnt charcoal on their face, which is not what black skin looks like. And they would also make their lips this big, massive red, which again is not how people look. It was blacks were the buffoons.
They were making fun. And the odd thing was black people weren't in the shows, nor were they allowed to attend. Yeah. But in James, Percival someone hears his great voice and he gets pulled in. And if you can imagine a black man pretending to be a white man, pretending to be a black man.
And the fascinating part about that, of course, is that, he's corked. He is given blackface to be somehow acceptable or brought in. He actually has to wear another mask. It can be linguistic, but it can also be in terms like actual appearance. And I think appearances play a huge role in how does one appear black, not only to speak in an idiom that's acceptable to white folk, right?
Yeah.
But to how to appear even in that space, and that's governed by, it's not sui generis. It's not coming from the person. It's being imposed,
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about this appearance of appearing, there are several characters in the book that pass. Now, black folks talk about this all the time. There are black folks who, because usually they're mixed, but their features appear very, very European.
Yeah, and passing is a huge theme in this book. It appears several times. We encounter one character. It's Norman. And he is mixed, and so he can pass as white. And there seems to be a little bit of privilege that he has that comes with passing. It's almost like a currency that he can use in order to survive. And so there's one scene where he pretends actually to be James's slaveholder. Yeah. And people believe him. The whites believe him.
Well, he completely passes. So it's not even a little bit of privilege. It's an on-off switch. Either you are or you aren't. And he gets hey, you're a white person. And it's also another thing that we're doing in terms of appearance and disguise. You can do it with language, but you can do it with the color of your skin. And I want to talk a little bit about, Chris, I'll ask you this one. The relationship between James and Huck Finn. In Huckleberry Finn, Jim is the subject of ridicule. He's always getting jokes pulled on him. It's a very different relationship.
Yeah.
In James, talk about that relationship and how it develops.
Right. So in Huck Finn, Jim is seen as a buffoon. He's the comic relief, and he doesn't have a character arc whatsoever in the book, and he disappears for long sections of the book, and we have no idea what journey he's been on. But in James, what we find is that James is very concerned with how he behaves around Huck, and he doesn't want to reveal how clever he is and how intelligent he is. And so he's still catering to Huck in that sense. But at the same time, he's also very protective of Huck. And he kind of takes on this sort of like patronly role with him, wanting him to do good, wanting to instruct him, while at the same time trying to hold some things back. And there's this scene very early in the book where James is having like lucid dreaming, and he's kind of talking in his dreams. And when he talks, he's using really large words, and he's very eloquent. And he wakes up, and Huck was like, "What were you saying?
Why are you talking so funny, James?
Talking like that?" And James is just like, "Oh, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. It was a dream."
Let's talk about the dream, though, because in the dream, James, who is well-read, and he's actually conversing with
Voltaire
and Rousseau and Locke about slavery and philosophy, and of course to Huck, who's hearing him sleep talk.
Yeah.
This is...
He's like, "What are you saying? Like, who are you?" And it's this moment where the mask drops unwillingly.
If you just joined us, you're listening to the next chapter, and we're having a great book club chat about James by Percival Everett. And with me here is J.J. Lee and the author Christina Estima. Here's a little bit more. Let's keep going. So, JJ, the satire is hard to escape in this story. It's one of the things that carry over from both books. And how does it hit you?
I'm glad you asked that, because I'm really impressed by how there are these set pieces, and you can, like, there's Brock in the steamship in the riverboat firing coal. He's a slave, but he apparently loves being a slave. And then there are many other scenes, many encounters along the river, and they all bring up an aspect of, many things that we already brought up in our conversation. What does it mean to deal with race now? Like, the subject of investigation really isn't Huck Finn at all, or Mark Twain. The subject of investigation is 21st century America, and I found that the most illuminating and just chilling part of the book, actually.
I felt, like I said, every single page I turned to, there were things James is doing that I had direct parallels to my life, like recent life, not even growing up. And that's the power of this. But I want to talk about the humor because, if you haven't read the book, you might be thinking, "Oh man, this is just going to bum me out." But actually, this book is hilarious.
Yeah.
I have to go back to Brock, who's the person working the coal fire engine and the steamboat. The absurdist part of Percival Everett's humor is what the part I most enjoy, because James begins to figure out that it is possible that Brock has no master.
Yeah. It's just the idea of master or massa, not the actual person.
I don't know if I laughed out. Did you guys laugh out loud?
I did not laugh out loud. It was it's dark humor.
I was cracking up the whole time.
Really?
But as a black person, I thought it was hilarious.
I was horrified.
Well, there's a billion-dollar industry of black people making fun of their pain, and I definitely have been there with it. So
wow.
So it's a litmus test. We have the James test exists now.
Totally.
If you laugh or don't laugh, there's something important to be said about that.
Okay, and so this book was the favorite for the Booker. It didn't win. Won the National Book Award in the U.S., the Kirkus Prize. Critics have praised this book to the skies. I want each of you to tell me, what is the reason that you think that it most deserves that praise?
I think I have to look at Everett's whole body of work, and I feel like this work is kind of like the culmination of a lot of the work he's been doing over the decades, where he takes an idea and and satirizes it, but he takes it 3 times around the dance floor.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, I'm thinking of like, you know, he wrote that book called I'm Not Sidney Poitier, and the character
that is my favorite book
right?
of his.
And it's like the character is called Not Sidney Poitier. Like it's
and
just
he looks exactly like Sidney Poitier.
You know what I mean? I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of his book Erasure, which was turned into the Oscar-winning film American Fiction, where he is literally satirizing how black books and black writers are marketed, and how they're received by the public is that the public wants pablum.
And it's really the same theme, isn't it? So,
Yeah,
I love that. So you're seeing James as a culmination
absolutely,
of his work.
He really is taking a lot of the beautiful things but the fallacies of Huck Finn, and then he is turning it into something else that it's not that the characters are on the spot, the reader is on the spot. The reader is forced to confront our own biases, and the reader is forced to confront why certain books like Huck Finn are in the canon and why other books are not. So I think that's what I love about James.
I love that you said that, because for me, the thing that makes it so poignant and so powerful is I think Everett is pointing at the fact that if America is built, and it's not if, is built on slavery, and the American reality now is black, and not in totality, but a huge part of what America is black, and to not respect it, not love it, not hold it close, is to actually hate yourself. And I think when America, in its sort of white dominant culture kind of way, oppresses black people and derides, it's self-harm.
Yeah.
That is a profound idea, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's what Percival is doing. Jim was always there. He was just never present. America's always been black. It's always been indigenous.
Yep.
It's always been all of us. Look, guys, my book club guests today were J.J. Lee in Vancouver and Christina Estima in Toronto. The book under discussion today was James by Percival Everett.
The next chapter